It's beautiful out here in Kentucky. Everybody doing well?
Good.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Excellent. Excellent.
So far, so good.
What's new? Since yesterday, at least.
Well, I was listening to yesterday's recording just before. I don't think I've quite finished it. It's got some
Yesterday's
interesting. Yeah, yesterday's was it?
Yeah.
The one with you, Nick, and Jason, is it?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting.
It gets better as we go too. Like it gets into the deeper stuff. I can't remember where we were though. Like what to actually feed off of there. What's been on my mind lately is, well, of course, getting this paper out, and you know, getting past that. I've started the Threefold Science section. In fact, I would make a plea that if you have a favorite out of place artifact, drop its name in the chat, because this next section that I'm writing is going to be about the out of place artifacts. I think that the section's titled like "Oop Arts Your Professor Doesn't Want You to Know Exist" or something like that. Best oop arts your professor wishes you hadn't asked about. That's what it is. So, you know, the way I'm setting up this MIMS paper is much more fun per se than all of the academic type, is to first talk about the science in crisis. Then I open the person up to the fact that there's more conspiracy facts than there are theories even to cover the facts. And then I mention a few things that have happened, including the Emil Velikovsky and Shapley thing. And then I'm going into the OOP arts, and then I'm going to step through, you know, it's not aliens necessarily. And, you know, also, you know, there's one's called like "Help Religion Hates My Occult Thing." And I'm trying to step the person forward so that they can finally do the three sciences: the sacred science, the supreme science, the secret sciences. And then the next big part after that will be scientism, the anti-MIMS destroying the world. That ought to be a lot of fun to write, but it's much needed. And then turning science back into a MIMS, and then I go into this will be Aaron's favorites, crossover to MIMS 2.5, microfinancing the future. So DeFi, gig economy, you know, all that stuff. And it's meant to be a fun paper, so less citations than the Conquering the Solar System paper. It is a MIMS philosophy paper. And yeah, and I'm playing with the 2-column thing. I'm not saying that all of them are going to switch to columns, because with images it's very inconvenient often to fit them in. I don't necessarily like, but in this paper I think I'm going to use the 2-column format. And that's
excuse me, Ramon.
Go ahead.
I've just texted Jason, and he'd like to join, but I don't think could you give him a call? I don't know, so he can join the chat.
I'm not able to give individual calls, but he just has to open up his Skype and then hit the join call button.
All right. Well, I'll relay those instructions to him.
Yeah, I'm unable to individually dial him once the call gets going. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll do that.
So Aaron, since we got you around this morning, maybe you could give us an update on some of your projects. You know, your ion drive came up yesterday, and I was trying to explain what we're really talking about is in the future 3D welded or 3D printed carbon cables to increase the surface area so that we can have current that exceeds millions of amps. And it reminded me of your project and the fact that you do a lot of 3D printing anyways. But it reminded me of your ion drive. So then I was talking about how you had difficulty getting any of these organizations to want to run simulations. So maybe you could tell people about your ion drive. And if you feel like sharing the screen and showing people your ion drive model, feel free, because currently we don't have anybody sharing screen.
So I'm not in front of the computer right now. Otherwise, I would.
Got
Um, the as far as power transfer and things of that nature, I'm finding that going away from using a physical media to transmit power uh, has a lot of advantages to it. So right now, um, I'm doing a lot of research into lasers, tight beam lasers, things of that nature for power transfer because it's directed, so you're not creating this immersion field that everything is being exposed to, a radiation field, really. You're able to create a tight beam um, energy flow. And one of the things that I started looking into was, hold on a second.
Okay, I'll pull up tight beam laser. It's interesting that you bring up tight beam laser or signals because we were talking about Fourier transforms yesterday as well. Look at this. So
And faster than lasers, just as an example. In the vacuum of space, you're able to get away with it. And for a lot of what we're going to need to do, tight beam lasers should do a very large portion of the solar system energy transfer. Surely it can do from orbit to ground relatively easy.
yeah,
And
and
then you
thanks
don't
for
blame
mentioning that. And it ended up in my Conquering the Solar System paper talking about because when I wrote Birkeland polyphase superweb, one of the difficulties was thinking about, well, how are we going to? It's easy to collect the charge, but the permeability of free space is very low. It's like 4 megavolts per meter, so it's very difficult to actually break it down. But this is a technology that they're currently actually working on. So that ended up in the paper as a way. So we create the contracts, we expand into space, tons and tons of satellites, and collect these huge with these gold foil arrays, collect all the charge, and then we can use this tight beam laser to transfer.
Yeah, one of the big things that keeps coming up is whenever you transfer electricity, the electricity doesn't actually flow in the wire. In fact, the electrons don't even flow really; they move
Yeah.
like millimeters over a period of what you're doing is you're transferring the field potential. I mean, you can use the flow of electrons in a wire for a lot of the math, and it ends up working. But the physics and everything behind it is a potential change on in the fields. And so when you're looking at tight beam lasers and things of that nature, you're having the field transfer, but you don't have the physical media that's causing the propagation, and you have a lot of losses and everything else over the space because they're interacting with whatever happens to be in between it, and vacuum of space isn't actually a cold vacuum. But all of those things aside, one of the things that I keep drifting towards is that tight beam lasers is a precursor to Birkeland currents. And so while we
So
start
you
with,
mean like you can use it to prime and start a Birkeland current?
so some of what I'm diving into is that okay, to start, you try and tell your community that you're going to start microwaving the power station, like you're going to be sending megawatts of energy in the form of microwaves to their neighborhood power station, and you'll get all kinds of like I don't care how safe it is, I don't care how much research and safety studies and everything else that you do, they're not going to like that. Um, but if you're using lasers, then you can create uh, because there's not a whole lot of regulation, there's not a whole lot of knowledge or anything else. I mean, lasers are generally safe as long as you don't look in them. And that's why you have compact disc players and Blu-ray and all of these other forms of lasers, very complicated technology that they're able to put at a consumer level. And so a lot of that technology is readily available. The efficiencies of taking energy potential and converting it into a laser, and then having the efficiency of converting it back into electrical potential, like there's a lot of losses there, but I think when you're talking cosmic energy potential, you have a lot of slop that you can play with.
Yeah, efficiency. I want to be clear. Let me interject real quick. One of the things that bothers me about the so-called green energy movement is that they have a ridiculous notion that it either has to be very efficient, or that we've got to do so much with this solar to get really essentially what to me is so little. And for them, Elon Musk seems to be impressed that you can have a 200 kilometer by 200 kilometers square. It would power all of Europe. I'm sitting there going, that's not the idea. The idea is there's so much energy that we just need a little bit, and we can afford to so-called waste a lot of it. We already do. We just don't really think about it because it's heat, it's sound, it's radio. It's every radio station putting out hundreds of megawatts at all the time. We don't need to capture all of it. We just need to capture some of it. And if we can funnel some of the solar wind into these satellites, and then, the big problem with the tight beam laser is assuring that you're hitting your target. But so what if you miss it for a little bit, or there's an alignment issue? The AI and the clusters of computers will recalculate all that. And it will make the error correction. We were talking about error correcting codes. And as long as more of the sun, which we will never be able to use all that energy, even when we have multiple railgun post stage 10, multiple railguns that take us, the 1 AU long railguns that take us out of the solar system, we'll still never use all of the electricity that comes from the sun. The only way they would ever run out is if for some reason the local chimney ran out of electricity, which I don't see happening. So people have got to stop thinking that there's not enough electricity, even on this planet. I don't think that we are capable, even at a stage 9 or 10 civilization, of actually using all of the geothermal and the magnetospheric energy that is contained within the Earth. Now, our magnetosphere is only a 20,000th as strong as Jupiter's. So,
well, I think it's also important to note that when I'm speaking about cosmic energy, the sun is a very small fraction of that, and no one knows exactly where all of this cosmic energy is coming from. But our ionosphere and everything else seems to be protecting us from the majority of it. But the sun makes up a lot of cosmic radiation. Cosmic radiation, not necessarily energy, because I don't want you to know that it's energy, because that implies abundance. But anyways, the sun only makes up a very small portion of it. And so they don't know exactly where it's all coming from. And so when we're talking about solar arrays and everything of that nature, the solar arrays are having to capture a very broad spectrum of visible light and potential and everything else in order to convert it into electricity. The collector for a tight beam laser can be specific to a wavelength, and then you can have the satellite dish on your house is it doesn't need to be right on perfect with the satellite in order to get really good reception. It just needs to be in the general vicinity. The same thing would go with the tight beam lasers and energy collection. Is you don't need to be perfect. You have a parabolic dish that will concentrate it onto your collector, and then you're pretty much good from there, because lasers they refract, they reflect, they refract, and you can take advantage of some of those properties. Then you don't necessarily need to be dead on the money. You just need to be in that general vicinity of that parabolic dish, and then you can have a lot of slop from your.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that you have to be Robin Hood, but you have to be in the vicinity, and we're talking. To think of communications and transfer all the way to Alpha Centauri, and all these things moving too relative to each other
and everything.
It's like the same rate. But the computing will calculate all that. That's another thing that I want whoever's watching and anybody in the spacer community to understand, that this stuff is all going to be 4-dimensional. We're going to have changes to our species and in our abilities over the next hundreds to 1,000 years. That's going to enable us to do things that we can't even imagine right now. In fact, my whole paper is really just kind of irrelevant even before it's released, because most of the ideas in there will just be the kernel, and then what actually happens will be something far more advanced and more profound than what we're capable of imagining right now. This idea that science has nearly figured it all out is so laughable. It reminds me of Lord Kelvin. Good old Lord Kelvin. He thought that everything was about to be known, and instead science got turned on its head.
Yeah, one of the main reasons why I brought up the energy transfer or transmission is because if you can get past the idea that you have to have a physical container or physical medium for energy to go from point A to point B, then now you can. One of the biggest issues with traveling at speeds close to the speed of light, or having continuous acceleration from here to Mars, making it a 3-day trip instead of a 3-month trip, is the existing chemical propellant that they're using, or storing physical energy or whatever, is extremely inefficient. And so I've been working on this form of energy transfer, primarily because the ion drive that I've built, and I've started prototyping, because no one will run simulations. I've broken every plasma model that I've put the thing through, because as long as you're feeding it gas, it doesn't matter if it's xenon gas or if it's atmospheric gas or whatever. It doesn't matter. It will ionize it and create thrust. And so that's going from sea level into upper atmosphere, and transitioning over to xenon, and then running xenon gas from here to Mars, a 3-day journey, as long as you can either collect or harness or transmit the energy to keep the ionization. So using, for instance, tight beam lasers, you dial in on the back end of the vehicle, and you can transmit the electrical potential needed to run the ion drives.
I want to tell people what's on screen. You guys can see my screen or no?
Yes.
So for the audience who isn't quite aware, this is a Mobius strip that was built, I forget which college it was at this, but they are using here superconductivity as a property. And so if there weren't losses due to gravity and air friction, this would just keep going, and there's really no physical friction between the object and the Mobius strip. And superconductivity, for our audience, is defined currently as when resistivity goes to 0. And it does this at an exact point in the material's property. So it's a property just like boiling point or freezing point, melting points, etc. And we don't really truly understand why yet, but we're on our way. And it's going to make a huge difference if we can use superconductive properties to transfer electricity within the vessel or within or on Earth. We're going to totally revolutionize the power transfer, and not just motion, because this is obviously all about motion, and they're looking, they want to do this for, you know, trains and rail launch and cars, etc. But to my mind, what's unique about superconductivity is it means that there's an entire portion of the force that we do not understand completely. And to me, it's always been an issue with the definition. It seems to violate the laws of thermodynamics, or our understanding of thermodynamics is not complete, and which seems more likely than any case. So if anybody'd like to talk about superconductivity, feel free. I'm going to mute this real quick.
They recently came out with a couple near room temperature superconductors. I thought that was very interesting, because you end up getting room temperature superconductors, and you get household supercomputers in very short order.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I put that in the paper. My vision for one of these future houses, because I don't think we're going to get rid of the people having a desire to have their own home. I don't think that that's going to go away. I think what will change is that each home will have will eventually come to, it'll be standard for people to have a healing pod. I think it'll be standard practice over the hundreds of thousands of years for people to have computing data centers, their own data centers. And so we'll need electricity for all of that. In between, you know, I think that we'll have people who are doing crypto mining, and they'll be able to heat their home with that instead of constantly, you know, having to always rely on either burning wood or natural gas or electric heating or something like that nature. I guess it is technically electric heating. And it makes me think of, I always think back to the SETI project and the ability to use distributed computing to do tasks. I think that when more people are participating in these science research projects, which does also remind me of your Ulium coin, that we will have more interest among youth into fundamental sciences. And that is going to bode well for anything from 3D printing research to, you know, unique welding techniques, nanotubes and nanobots. All these things start to become more accessible to all of humanity if all of humanity is partially involved in the process. And having room temperature superconductors is, I think, going to be a major game changer. Chemistry is going to go through a revolution, I think, that nobody from their side is expecting. I'm thinking that the structured atomic model is going to change our need for a periodic table into a three-dimensional periodic table. I've said this before over the years, that we are looking at isotopes incorrectly. We're looking at atoms incorrectly. And there's a hint that's contained in these families, these vertical families, something that we're not fundamentally understanding as a species. And when that happens, when we unlock that, we're going to be able to get rid of a lot of different types of toxic materials just by understanding what portions of the nucleus are actually the problem, and staying away from those materials, or finding other materials that do similar things without having those types of molecules, for lack of a better way of describing the shape of these things. I think, I don't know that the SAM guys have come up with a name for those little modules that are repeated in the nucleus, but they look like molecules. And when we can do that,
They're just using hydrogen.
Yeah, but I don't know that there are these different shapes that they come up with. They're various solids that then they repeat. And I don't know if they've come up with a name for that or for the shape in general.
Okay, so when I got my degree in biology, I made sure to get a degree in physics and chemistry as well, because in order to understand biology, you have to understand chemistry, and in order to understand chemistry, you have to understand physics. The problem is the current physics model that they teach in school is uh, incredibly flawed. You ask the wrong question and you're going to get the teacher flustered, hence your paper. Um, um, Actually, I got kicked out of medical school because I asked too many of the wrong questions. It's the right questions to me, but the wrong questions to the teacher. They got really upset with me. Anyway, so one of the key things in which we always learned in biology is geometry and shape is everything. So one protein out of place, one molecule out of place, and the the end product won't be right. So the protein won't fold correctly. The cell will be sickle shaped instead of donut shaped. I mean, there's a lot of disease associated with just simply one piece to the puzzle not folding correctly. The same thing happens. Like you can take that lesson and apply it to everything else in life. So chemistry, you have one let's say the pharmaceutical in which they used to treat that Merck used to treat morning sickness, they didn't take into account the what's it called, the isomer, I believe, where you have like the left hand and the right hand, to where they're the same molecule, but one is a mirror image of the other. I'm sure we'll get someone that'll correct me on the proper terminology for that, but big picture was it caused a lot of problems, and that's a chemical affecting biological systems. The same thing goes with atomic. So when you're thinking about atomic and subatomic and everything, you're absolutely right. It has to be three-dimensional, and one of the one of the things that comes to mind is there's if you take all of the atoms and you align them based off of their atomic weight, then you can put them all on a nice curve that is respective of their vibrational frequency. So you have atomic weight and atomic frequency, and you can put them on a nice, neat little curve. Your radioactive isotopes, well, the ones in which they've found so far, they're outliers to one side or the other of that curve. The further away from that curve that they are, the more radioactive that they are. And one of the big things that that tells me is that it's incomplete, that they're only accounting for a portion of that scale. So you can take a radioactive element and it will likely have a isotope that is stable within the general consensus. But if you take all of the different atoms and you um, um, use their all of their different formations, and so carbon has three, I believe. So carbon 12, carbon 13, and carbon 14. 12 and 13 are stable. 14 is not. But if you take all of those identified um, formations and you map them out three-dimensionally, then you can start seeing what is it? It's a complex curve to where now you can say this is the stable frequency, that everything like everything is going to be a multiple or some kind of harmonic of this general frequency. And then the radioactive isotopes, they're going to be somewhat dissonant. And so it's to one side or the other, it creates a clash. But the one thing that I've been playing with that idea is, theoretically, if you go to a different part of the galaxy or the universe, and there's an abundance of that radioactive material, so carbon-14 instead of 13, then you are the radioactive one in that environment, and so you become radioactive and you start decaying and causing radiation sickness with everyone else, which to me says we can't go faster than light. We can't go to Andromeda or anything of that nature, because we don't know if we're going to be radioactive or if the environment's going to be radioactive to us, because we don't know what the stable harmonic is there. So you would need to actually go through the voyage between here to there and make this slow incremental change until you become resonant with that area.
I'm gonna push back on that the kind of vessel that we will have in stages 9 and 10, think of it this way: it's all logarithmic. Our vessel that we have, even in phase 1 of stage 1, is pathetic compared to what will be in phase 2 of stage 1, when we are actually successful at being on the moon consistently. And then we'll probably still be doing it wrong. So now when you talk about the difference between a stage 9 and stage 10 vessel, which is able to easily traverse trans-Newtonian orbits with no problem, and is fully wired into the grid. It's got all the inertial dampening. It is fully just everything. It's got plasma test turbines. That vessel will be 10 times the ability of what is in stage 9, let alone where we're at. It'll be thousands of times, maybe hundreds of thousands of times more advanced than where we're currently at. So if we extrapolate that, once we're capable of actually traveling towards Alpha Centauri, which is totally reasonable, we don't know who we'll encounter, what knowledge they'll have, what kind of properties. It may very well be, not that I believe in wormholes, but that we will find out how to enter into this counter space where entropy is flowing differently, possibly potentially in the other direction. And it may be that we're able to bilocate. We don't really have any idea of what the physics will be like at that stage. We know that it won't be, physics that you can't, define or touch. It won't be a dark universe, but it will be different in some way that's so fundamental that a lot of our assumptions, I think right now, are incredibly premature as a society. And they're based again on this concept of that things are limited. The only thing that seems limited to me is that we have a physical impedance in our body, and that we have a finite number of neurons. There's a lot of neurons, though. It's hundreds of billions of them, but it's still a finite number. And that seems to be the only thing that's really of a limit, getting out of religion and spirituality and, doing right and wrong. I mean, just speaking scientifically, I don't think that our assumptions that we have now should limit us to potential development for the future. And it's a point.
Real quick.
Go ahead.
So my statement, right, that I just finished making was if we were to go as it is with our technology right now, if we were capable of going from here to another galaxy or whatever, the whole point was that we would be the radioactive ones, or that the entire environment would be radioactive to us. I think the key lies, especially with the three-dimensional periodic table, I think the key lies in radiation. So radiation is very misunderstood. It's very, electricity is a form of radiation, but we can better understand it. Magnetic field is a form of radiation. But when we think radiation, we think like a nuclear reactor or a fuser or something of that nature, gamma, beta. So I think the key lies in radiation, and I'm you and I've talked about it, but I don't think anyone else has really heard about it. The reactor, in which uses how to say gradients in order to create electrical potential, and so I can't get into specifics, but the idea, the concept is the more load that you would put on this reactor, the more stable it would become. And so, generally speaking, it's relatively stable unless you were to use like a plasma torch or something like that on it. Then it would become very unstable very quickly. But what the general idea is, as we're getting into additive manufacturing, as we're getting into material science and things of that nature, we're able to create crystalline structures like through the additive manufacturing process. And those crystalline structures have very unique antenna almost, in that they can draw in heat, radiation, like all of these different things in which we call waste. So vibration, the convert it into a more usable format. And when a reactor like that is fully operational, then energy becomes abundant. You don't need to have centrifugal gravity. You can manufacture your own gravity, or the thing would likely produce its own B field, because I'm really convinced that gravity is a buoyancy more than it is a force, and so that's a lot of your wave. What is it? Your wave theories, the propagation of a wave and everything else, is more of a buoyancy than an actual field. So it's not like you can't measure layers of the field, and it's the same all the way up until this next shell, and then the next one, and the next, which is the way that they're thinking about atoms and everything. It's more of a field, and if you were to go and as you start to go down in water, as an example, then you're increasing your pressure and everything as you continue to go down, down, down. Then you get to the point to where you don't need to worry about floating back up to the top or anything of that nature. You have so much pressure around you that it becomes very sluggish to move or anything of that nature. And that's kind of what we're seeing in your general gravity theory, is that buoyancy effect. But going back to the project at hand, even having a reactor like that's pulling in the gradient differences, the source of the problem is, until we're like a Kardashev 2 or Kardashev 3 species, which I'm guessing you're lining up with like 8 or 9 of your stages.
Define for the audience, regardless of, are you talking about our communications ability, our power level? I can't recall how. So
power level. Kardashev is so a Kardashev 1 uses all of the energy of a planet. Kardashev 2 uses all of the energy of like a solar system, so of a star. And then you've got like a Kardashev 3, which is using the energy potential of an entire galaxy. And then like a Kardashev 4 is like unfathomable. Like you're using universal energy, and you don't like energy is just effortless at that point. So I don't think that there would ever. Um, I've been surprised before, but anyway, so you're saying like I think as you're getting into 7 and 8 on your stages, you're starting to look at solar system level, because you're past a planetary energy consumption, and you're going to towards a solar system level consumption, which your stage 10 doesn't even get to full solar system level consumption. It's still working that way. When we have a reactor that's able to pull the energy from all of these gradients, as long as you're in the craft, like within the safety of the vehicle, you can go from point A to point B, and it doesn't matter what the outside environments are, because the reactor is tuned to you, to your ideal environments and everything, because you built it. Now, if you go from point A to point B, then it's still working off of your gradient. And so it's going to be pulling in all of the radiation and converting it into energy. You'll get to a point where you're struggling to use all of the energy potential that you have in order to not irradiate yourself. So you're just sending lasers out, and who knows what. But the fact of the matter is, our bodies, our physical limitation is still fixed on this frequency. So until we can figure out how to change atomic frequencies, how to make something go from radioactive to non-radioactive, and do it very efficiently, we're not going to be able to go from point A to point B if point B happens to be radioactive. So we won't be able to go and walk on some of these planets, because the majority of the planet is being bathed in a radioactive star.
I was just thinking about last night. This is going to sound kind of awful. I was thinking about the concept I have. I was thinking about it militaristically, actually, for martial reasons. But that's because I've been watching Blood of Zeus, the anime, and looking at all those motifs and just thinking about electricity and the ability to actually conduct electricity as a weapon. But really, what I'm interested in is using lasers to change the quantum entanglement to attract charge or repel charge in an object. So, for example, let an asteroid collect a bunch of electricity, then move it within a short distance of another object, and then set it off with a laser, like an avalanche of charge. And I don't know if anybody else has thought about this, but it might have an industrial application.
Well, I think generally speaking, large astrological bodies won't collide with the Earth, because they end up repelling each other. But that doesn't mean that large astrological bodies don't arc to each other, and that happens a lot. And a lot of your historical research has actually brought up a lot of cosmic thunderbolt events. I mean, the face of Mars, the scar of Mars, was a cosmic thunderbolt. I mean, you can see all of the rubble on the opposite side when cast the Furies into. I was actually having a conversation with my father not too long ago. How the crown of thorns is a visual interpretation of the meteorite that was cast up from Mars. So I'm not sure if that's a direct interpretation or indirect, or but anyway, thinking, any one of the projects or inventions or anything else, research that I'm doing right now, and you misalign one variable, and it becomes a weapon, unintentionally, but it could become a weapon. So, for instance, uh, take the shared consciousness. There's been several events to where there's been like this shared empathy or something of that nature amongst everyone on the planet. So I think 9/11 was one of them. But if you were to use that frequency, so it's a very low frequency, probably just a couple of hertz. You're getting down some really hard stuff. But if you were to take and then propagate that frequency, so you were to put energy into the field, and then you were to change the frequency slightly, then everything that is resonating at that frequency would be inclined to draw towards the change, and you would be able to I don't even want to think about it, but you could exterminate the entire population in just a matter. So no bomb, no weapons, no boots on the ground, just.
Yeah, I was more thinking from an individual perspective, in case I needed to draw some lightning down. And then I was thinking, is there a way that we can figure out what a person is on a good wave or an evil wave? Like there must be a frequency. I mean, I've talked to my kids about this in the philosophy class about the difference between right and wrong, good and evil. And then we talked about the presence of actual evil. And I'm sure most people, the fellas on the call and most people have, but I'm going to recount for people the actual physical results of being in the presence of evil. Your heart races, you get sweats, nausea, you can't think straight. You have a adrenal and cortisol reaction, which you don't have any control over. Your fingertips might turn cold, or possibly your entire body could feel cold. You might get hair standing on the ends. So there is some kind of cold wave in the Mopai Qigong system. They actually call that the yin force. However, it's not yin qi in the positive essence way. It's definitely a different, separate energy, which you can use as a martial attack. Now, if your body can have that physiological reaction, there must be some kind of signal and frequency that it is existing on, sort of an anti-Schumann, anti-solfeggio resonance, something that's sort of opposite to the way that we're designed, that would potentially hack our positive life generation. And because theoretically, our bodies being transformers, we should be going forward, collecting information, food, and ether, and transforming these three things into our energetic being through some sort of interesting biological wet DNA computing machine. And then we go forward and we produce life. And the Chinese talk about the generation of life. Well, in which case, it seems to me that we should be capable of actually creating detection for looking for this, not to again attack the center, but always you want to look for the sun. But maybe we can actually see it moving around in their body. Because in Chinese medicine, you can actually you can see where it's located, and you can chase it out of the body. There's entire techniques for moving bad energies out of the body. But there have been people that have come in. I would say 2 or 3 in my 10 plus years of operation, that they are what I would call infested, and they're not coping with it. Because I've had people who cope with it too. I had a man who was radiating this energy that burned my skin from a distance. And his skin was all patchy and burned up. He worked all the time. He was a very good father. He was a good guy, but his skin was constantly like plaquing. It's a very strange case. And if you were near him when you would needle him, I mean, it was a very unpleasant feeling. It was like being burned on little bitty points on your hands. But other people, particularly, I'm thinking of a case recently where when he came in, I told my patient, I said, he's got evil in him. And, I won't recount their entire love life, but suffice it to say, she needs a protection order against him now that we've gotten him away from her. So the ability to detect these things could be useful in, say, finding out who's a psychopath at a young age, finding out if a person is currently undergoing not an internally generated schizophrenic case, a psychic breakdown, but an externally, like they're being hacked is what I call that. Locating individuals who may have participated in some kind of monstrous crime, like satanic cult. Maybe they sacrificed little Jimmy and nobody knows what's happened. These kinds of technologies, in which case we would need that kind of thing in order to actually properly utilize any such. So until then, I figure the only thing that's good for my idea is to, again, point at a rock and tell it, okay, transfer electricity over to this rock. But I keep coming back to it. I think that it's possible, and I don't think it's unrelated to my idea of rewinding, like a quantum field detector that can rewind history in a given field and show you what actually happened there. And that idea came to me when I was standing on the banks of the Ohio, trying to figure out how I'll ever prove, when you have something that constantly washes and floods down the river and takes away its evidence, how I'll ever prove that ships once went up this river for the purpose of commerce in the age of Matic in the 1100s to 1400s, and the idea of being able to rewind and see the fields, or at least have a detector to see it. I mean, we wouldn't physically see it. The detector feeds it to the computer, and then the computer creates graphics out of it. I feel like it's intrinsically related to the same concepts of superconductivity, quantum synchronicity, quantum entanglement, spooky action at distance. These things that we know about, they are not fake like dark matter, but they are real things. And of course, I think they're all related to the ether. And that I think is what will really define our stage 9 and 10 societies, is if we have complete so-called control over that, if we're allowed to even have it. That's another question.
So
can I just point out that I don't think the human body's necessarily compatible with massive electric fields, that we don't fully understand how these interrupt our biological processes. But I know that people who live on the power transmission lines problems.
Yeah.
And until we've got to be very careful how we use this energy from a human point of view. I think giving everyone the ability to be able to use as much energy as you require for whatever you want. I don't think many people would use it very parsimoniously or wisely. So until we've got really good data and an absolutely rock solid plan, I think things like exploding asteroids is a good idea if we can collect all the energy from the process and not interrupt the set off all the chain reactions in the environment, even on a solar system level. So we've really got to model what we do with numbers, and then small scale experiments, find out the feasibility and of these these situations, and and try and steer away from the war solution. That's the thing. Always think, what you can do with that energy for the benefit, really, for the greater benefit, I suppose you'd have to call it. But I must say that I don't think I'd like to live in a kind of scientific pod in a row of a fridge, but 10 miles underground on Mars or something like that. I just really wouldn't want to do it.
Well, I wouldn't either.
And
There's a problem in society for cyborgs and androids, to be honest with you. But
that's it. And I see the only way that we're going to really explore these places is in terms of conscious exploration. I think we may have avatars in machines that can go there and live an avatar kind of existence, but what the physical basis, getting your consciousness. It might have to be kind of a machine hybrid kind of consciousness, or a part consciousness that you can connect with from a planetary place. And it looks like it looks like we're evolving into more like kind of battery chickens at the moment. Anyway, we're evolving to be able to sort of live in these close confined spaces in, just like a colony of rats or something, where previously we wouldn't necessarily have done that. Or that might be an economic thing. I don't know. Not that I'm in those conditions, but I mean, people are getting squashed together a lot more.
Smaller apartments.
Yeah, so I think we really need trillions of people to be able to cause any kind of expansion. The next kind of level expansion from billions to trillions, and then I think there will be a necessity to take these absolutely enormous energy sources on a large scale. I think until then we've got to maybe get away from the global solution. Well, we need global solutions to some problems, but other problems we need very simple local solutions.
Well, yeah, but you're still talking about where we're at now, which is a phase 1, stage 1 society. And yeah, you're not wrong there. We've got to break up the massive monopolies, because nature works on competition. It works on diversity and resilience. So we've got to get away from these mega corporations doing everything for us, and but what'll happen is you break it up, it gets small, and each one gets bigger. And then when they get huge, then you break them up, and then they get bigger, and then you break them up and you get bigger. And the same thing with these superpower countries. The United States needs to go back to acting like 50 states. And by the way, in my opinion, not only do we need 50 votes in the plus each territory vote in the UN, but I believe all of our Indian nations deserve to have their own votes in the UN, and they could vote against the United States, and very likely probably would, and that would be karma. But this idea that it should just be one giant empire is wrong, and the same thing with China. But it's the way things are right now. I think nature will handle a lot of that. As far as what we can pre-engineer, my goal is for us to focus on the technical and the space exploration, on account of its sort of secular, sort of neutral, sort of everybody understands it should be done. I mean, we are headed towards space wars, unfortunately, but everybody understands it should be neutral. It should be like Antarctica, right? Everybody has a chance to go down and do research. And if we can do that, then we have the opportunity to mature and to grow while we work through these obvious psychological hangups that we have. Like I said, I was watching Blood of Zeus, and it's a fantastic anime. If people get a chance to check it out, a lot of the motifs are there, and then some of the psychological tropes are there. You know, Joseph Campbell stuff, and there's very little of the modern agenda that's been injected into it, unlike the She-Man and the Masters of the Universe for Netflix, where they have modernized it for no good reason. And in which case, if these motifs are going to keep coming up, and we're going to keep treating, if we're going to keep treating women like they might turn into a vicious psycho hose beast and destroy everyone, then they're going to continue to learn that that's good behavior. And if we're going to keep treating men that it's normal to flip out and go to war for small provocations every time that you feel your masculinity is threatened, then boys will continue to learn that. And until we get past this Mars-Venus thing, I'm not even sure we can deal with our mental hangups and psychological abuse from the gods and the Titans. That we continue to propagate that story. I mean, that is what is happening in the Blood of Zeus. It happened in the Disney Hercules story. We continuously, and then in the Thanos, right? Thanos is, you know, the mad Titan who snaps his fingers and half the universe is destroyed. We're going to continue propagating these bad programs until we really deal with them head on. And I reckon that our Spacer Society is going to be the one most likely able to do that. I don't know how it'll do it without eliminating dopamine and making us into robots, because then you're not really human. And that has been explored in the new RoboCop. You know, that new RoboCop movie got panned by people, and I think it just went over people's heads because it covered a lot of really pertinent science fiction questions that are currently happening.
It's the meta story. It's the meta story. Hamlet's Mill. It's a repeating set of. It's a loop of psychological situations that we are stuck in, and until we can get out of them or discover the next level to burst out. That's our lot.
You might find it interesting too that your concept of using consciousness to explore other bodies is actually Hare Krishna's, I believe, the same thing in the Bhagavad Gita as it is. These Christians identify the gods as these other spheres, and then they talk about visiting those places, but they say specifically that you won't be allowed until your consciousness exceeds a certain ability. I find that an interesting concept.
Yeah, you've got AR and XR technology that's getting really close to being able to do that. Then you've got like 312 terabytes a second for fiber optic cables. Still in research, obviously, over in Japan, but that's incredibly fast. Like real time, every stimuli that you can think of feed, like video feed, like going to a headset or into like an immersion room or something of that nature. The big thing that I wanted to point out, because we're getting into some of the fuzzy science when we start talking about the yin and the yang. Just simply saying the yin and the yang is like a two-dimensional representation of like good versus evil, plus and minus, so on, light and dark. So that's a two-dimensional representation of duality. If you take that and you bring it into the 3 dimensions, it's no longer up and down. It's perpendicular, and so that's where you end up having your E field and your B field, how they're perpendicular to each other out of phase. They're still interacting, but they're out of phase. Because then you got your sine wave going up and your cosine going left or right. And people need to start thinking outside of 2 dimensions and start thinking into 3 dimensions. And then after that, they can start thinking about 4 dimensions, and 4 dimensions starts getting really complicated. But by using some of the technology which I briefly mentioned with the reactor, uh, the antenna and the crystalline structures and everything else, you're able to take uh, the input that's being received from all of these different frequencies, and you can turn it into a sensor of sorts, and that starts getting into your hyperspectral imaging, to where your electricity doesn't just propagate forward in time. There's been many experiments that shows that that energy, that electricity, even which electricity is a very primitive way of thinking about energy and everything, but electricity will flow forwards and backwards in time. And then you start getting into more of a looking glass, and that you can see what's happening right now in the present. You can see what's going to happen in the immediate future, and you can see what's happened in the immediate past. But it's always very plastic, so you look too far ahead and it's going to be there's way too many variables to consider. And so it's like a spider web, to where you're an array is like from one point to multiple points, and you're looking at an array that consists of arrays that consists of arrays. So you can only ever look 2 or 3 decisions into the future. Decisions is a very easy way of talking about it. But when you mentioned the asteroid, charging it by the solar wind, and then using the laser to release the energy, that is getting into the Birkeland, so going from laser to Birkeland currents. So for instance, lightning bolts, electricity and everything will flow much easier in an ionized medium versus in a vacuum or in ambient or whatever. And so I can't remember the exact ratio off the top of my head, but if you have, for instance, a spark gap, then there's a known voltage in order to get the spark to jump the gap at atmospheric. You go to sea level, you go to like the top of a mountain, and there's going to be very minor but measurable differences in that spark gap because of the atmospheric difference. You take and you use a laser in that spark gap. Now all of a sudden you've got ionized potential in between the spark gap, and it's able to make that that leap at a much lower voltage, much lower potential. So if you have, for instance, an asteroid, and you shine a laser from here to the asteroid, now all of a sudden you've created an ionized channel, and you can siphon off the electrical energy through that ionization, and start collecting the energy. And so that is getting into some of your Birkeland currents, like using lasers to create conduits to transfer large electrical potential.
That is exactly correct. And let me thank you for thank you for the verbal segue here into the Birkeland polyphase superweb. It's not a paper that I get to talk about often enough, to be honest with you. In my mind, let me see here. Where do I have? First of all, I need to put it on this screen so you guys can actually see it. And I think I have it under the spacers. So just sort of for people to know, the menu up here, if it's standard, could be alt stream, could be mainstream cosmology, it goes under this. If it has to do anything at all with my work or someone else's work who's worked with me, it'll end up in the EPMC for extended. If it is beyond the main cosmology, it'll end up in this column. So our spacers work that Aaron and I work on will be down here. The MEMS will also be down here. My various shows, again, down here. So here I have an embed of the actual paper. And let's see, give it a second to actually load the images. So we can see here, the rotations, that's Saturn having its counter rotations. Those are Birkeland currents. You have Jupiter's bands going in opposite directions. Those are Birkeland currents. Bear in mind, folks, that if you want to see the papers in their best view, click the little bit.ly links, and then it will take you to the Google Docs, and that way you can see these moving animated GIF files. Here's some of the roiling, magnetism that happens right above. This is right above Earth. This is from the MMS mission, and every time there's a so-called magnetic reconnection, these are potential chances for a Birkeland polyphase superweb grid to capture massive amounts of energy in a very short period of time. Because whenever these kinds of pinches happen, based on our studies of quasars and supernova, and of course, so-called black holes, the amount of power that's available skyrockets. It's not a linear, like this doesn't just add up. It is an extremely dense amount of energy in a small volume. And I don't reckon that we really understand why it's happening. It's probably related to the ether. Here is just an image. This is an interesting image that I captured off of Warp Perception's video. He did a slow motion capture of slow motion. And I want to point out that so you have your normal arcing here that's breaking down the permeativity of the air. And then you have here this purple glow mode that goes dark mode and then reaches and wraps around to the other side and then comes back into glow mode. That is probably a Birkeland current.
I'm not seeing your screen. Is that just me, or?
It should be. It's set to share.
I can see it. I don't know how this works because sometimes you can't see it, sometimes you can.
Yeah. Skype is like that. It'll be on the video though.
On the playback, then it's fine.
Yeah. All right. So then we have this hand-drawn conception of collecting all this energy right out in space. We have all the different asteroid belts that are circulating. There's lots of different kinds of asteroid belts that we can utilize as collectors in our early stages until we have enough gold foil collectors. Because obviously gold and other similar precious metals are a little bit rare until we can find a solution. I reckon probably Io is going to be our best place to find these because of all of the electrical connections there. I think the sulfur is a good indicator that we're going to find, rarefied minerals. I'm trying to remember if there's any other important images, and that's just more. That's just the double layers from the sapphire. Yeah, the Thunderbolt generation. But yeah, so people review this would be a good paper to start with before you do the full. Here's the grades of catastrophe here in Appendix A. This would be a good place to start before you try to tackle the Conquering the Solar System paper, because it outlines a lot of the so-called science fiction that is just around the corner based on this cosmology. And then from there, you can, of course, then go right into. There is a review of this information in the Conquering the Solar System. However, a lot of the background of what Aaron's talking about, I cover in this paper. We're getting close to is there any other topics anybody wanted to bring up today? Did people get a chance? I know Robert's not here. Did people get a chance to look at that 48-second video and decide what they thought was going on?
I haven't seen that yet. I've been.
If you want to share a link real quick, I'd love to look at that.
Well, I'll put it up since it's my video. I wouldn't be violating any terms of service. So we'll just play it. I'll mute the thing here. So it's the coil vibrating back and forth, and you can see the sparking happening. And the puzzle was, why is it so? Why is this so-called perpetual motion machine? How is it really working? And yeah, it is going up and down. It's hard for the camera to capture it, but the spring is actually going up and down. Anybody got any ideas?
Is it on a piezoelectric? Is it on a piezoelectric spring housed on it?
So these are just your typical, flat permanent magnets down here.
Yeah.
And then this is just a copper wire. And then you have your battery on the inside of your.
Oh, so there's a battery there, right?
Yeah. Now this is not a 2A battery. This is one of those lithium batteries for high-powered flashlights.
Full disclosure, I still can't see your screen, so I don't know what you're showing.
Well, it's in the chat. If you just go up above, last night, right after I put the MIMS paper link. And there's the zoom in. So I think it's an interesting puzzle. A lot of people are going to be confused as to how it works. The standard model explanation for it is that you have, so first of all, when the wire first connects, you have a sudden short, and that short is basically there because the wire is considered to be zero or low resistance, like almost no resistance. And the current flows instantly through. When it does that, then it goes around the coil, creates a magnetic field. The magnetic field is then repulsed by the other magnetic field, plus it's creating a kind of a hysteresis effect inside the metal, inside the battery. That causes it to repel, and then it bounces up. So it's not about the spring per se creating the energy, but it loads the spring up because now the spring bounces up. Then there's an arc. The arc continues. It gaps, and when it gaps, it creates an alternate current because now your direct current is blocked. So you have a pulse, and then it's cut off. So then it comes down. The spring pulls it back down, and when it pulls it back down, then it arcs, and that arc is not generating energy, but what would be the right way to say this? Well, it does smell. There's a heat transfer that happens inside the battery because of the induction and the so-called alternating current. It's a direct current, but it's happening in pieces. And then the sparking is happening because the metals are ionizing as they touch. But there is a small explosion that happens, and then a small explosion also combined with the magnetism causes the wire to spring up just enough to break the connection, and it all starts over and over again.
Morning, fellas.
Good morning.
I can't stay long.
Yeah,
we
were actually just wrapping up.
Oh.
Yeah,
well,
okay. We were talking about the can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, we were talking about this so-called perpetual motor, and it's important. The audience can't tell just by looking at this video, but the battery does get very hot in a short period of time.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think it's
since I was
perpetual at all.
giving the answer.
I think if you were to do the same thing with like a dead battery or something of that nature, then you wouldn't have that at all.
Correct. Yeah. So it's not
No,
really.
that would have to be a live battery, obviously, but
Yes.
I think what's going on, heat is being generated instead of an electric charge, and that heat is the same heat probably that we witnessed in Sapphire.
Well, I mean, there is plasma every time there's an arc here.
Yeah.
And you get smoke coming up too.
Well,
However, the main reason for it generating
ozone.
is because, and ozone, is because of the alternating current created by the sudden connection, which is a short and sudden disconnection. And that alternating current creates an inductive property in this coil, which then the magnetic field is interacting with these magnets. But primarily these magnets are here just to ensure that it doesn't bounce around, that the battery physically stays put. Most of the repulsive force that is occurring is coming from the magnetic field, the hysteresis being generated inside the battery, and this arc explosion here pushing the spring up. You see this, the way you create this is you keep the wire off of the lead, and you tighten this to where the wire is just barely touching the lead on the top, the positive lead. And then you use the magnets to hold the copper lead on the negative side and keep this battery from bouncing around. But most of the energetic action that's happening is because of that alternating current that is created sort of by accident. And then the spring is kinetically pulling it back down, so it's always coming back into connection, creating that instant short. And when it instantly shorts, there's a direct delta spike that happens in the current flow. And so it's technically alternating current, which means it's technically got induction. And it gets hot because of the hysteresis as well, and not only because there's a short, but the short is the main reason for it to get hot. It's because there's an instant connection between the source and load, and the
Right.
the battery becomes its own resistor.
Right, but it still discharges at a certain point. It'll run out of power. No.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so it's not really truly perpetual motion unless you are able to wirelessly transfer more electricity into this battery.
Well,
But
no,
then it'd be,
that's
what would be the point? Because this doesn't have any particular utility.
Yeah.
It is an interesting puzzle though, because it has RLC components or portions to it. It has nothing at all to do with antenna signal. I'm not sure. I mean, there is a received frequency in this wire, but it's going to be a very low frequency because of the length of the wire.
Right.
It's quite long. And so, quarter wave, you'd have to stretch it out and measure it, and then you could calculate how long of a wave, but it's going to be a very low frequency wave. So there wouldn't be very much electricity coming from wireless sources like the sun or whatever.
right.
You can't completely neglect it, but you can basically neglect it. It has very little to do with why it's vibrating continuously. Anyways, I thought it would be interesting. I didn't know Robert would have such a strong opinion about it. It's too bad that he wasn't here today. I don't know where he's been. He's probably been busy.
I was watching Greg's video. You talking about the megafauna extinctions?
Yeah.
You pronounce the town wrong.
Which town?
Versailles.
No. In Kentucky, they really don't pronounce it correctly. They really pronounce it as Versailles.
It's Versailles.
I know what it is.
I'm just saying it's Versailles. That shit
I'm
drives me
letting you
nuts.
know. You can't get anybody here to know that this is Versailles Road. It's called Versailles Road. It's hilarious.
Tell them they're idiots.
Well, I mean, you know,
Oh,
it's now
I
it's
do all
what's
the time.
colloquialism.
Tell them
And
they're idiots.
It's been
Just
called
plain out.
Versailles probably over 100 years, and so it's such a colloquialism that it's hard to, you know, get people to understand that.
Fucking Americans.
Funny thing. Funny thing. That fake black guy Sean King or whatever, he comes from Versailles. down the road.
Versailles.
Well,
Versailles.
it's not Versailles here. It's called Versailles.
It's
Well,
Versailles.
my grandpa was in the Belgium in the First World War, and he wasn't at Ypres, he was at Wipers. So, and you'll never tell him different.
Holy fuck. Wipers.
Yeah, yeah, that's the one.
Wow. Poor Gramps.
He made it back anyhow, so cool.
Well, sorry,
No, you're all good.
I just had to
Doesn't
comment
bother
on
me at
that.
all. I know the same thing. In high school, I went through the same need to tell everybody that they were pronouncing it wrong. But I mean, that's an
French
uphill battle
goddamn.
here.
And there's even a goddamn town in France called Versailles.
There sure is. An old palace named after the town.
Yep.
So I can bring up here that on the spacers page now the Conquering the Solar System paper is visible in the embed here. So all the animations will work in case people don't click or whatever. So again, from the gateway, from the link in the description, just hover over here and go down to spacers, and you'll find these papers embedded. I do appreciate if people download the papers directly from academia. That helps the algorithms. But you know, it's good to stop by here and learn what our acronym is all about. We also
did you put a little note of that on the page? You should perhaps put a little note on that. I mean, you could say something like, you can feel free to download from here, but if you go to academia and download it, it's better for them.
Well, you know, basically from the directory, most of the links, this Conquering the Solar System paper is the only one in the directory that I'm going to leave as a Google Doc link. And the reason why is, honestly, people, you really do need to see it in animation form, because a lot of the animated GIF files are not all just for fun. Like in some of mine, you know, they're just for fun, but in some cases there's an actual utility for it to be animated. And as far as I know, I may be the only person who is actually animating in that, or putting animated images into their academic papers. I may have invented that. I have no idea how trendy I am. But if people, one thing I want to put out there is for people to consider going to the volunteer page, looking over how to become an extended plasma electromagnetic cosmologist, because we do need more people doing this kind of research. I'm glad Jason's joined in here. He puts a lot of energy in. We need more people doing all sorts of electrogeology. I loved when, you know, Jacob Gable put up a new video, and suddenly Billy Yelverton was on there, I was on there, and Robert Hawthorne was on there, Robert Hawthorne Jr. We were all 4 electrogeologists all on there. The only 2 missing were Mungo Jupp, and Andy Hall. But we need more electrogeologists doing the research, and it's a good community. We're all good people, and we want to help the world. And I want to point this out here. What you do, what you give, what you believe in circles back around. I fully believe that. And you're in charge. You know, use these resources, be the change you want to see in the world. And I do believe that only we can stop the march of fascist scientism. And it's going to be in the new paper. It's going to be a fun paper, Threefold Science. I've never done it before, never released this before. I talk about it a lot in the clinic. There is in the directory, if people can't wait for hearing about the Threefold Sciences, at the bottom of my directory, there is a non-EPMC paper. Oh no, it's in this this column here. There's an alchemical process. That's like a 300-page document. So that there are some materials here, but this Threefold Science paper will be the first time that we're bringing the alchemical and the new cosmological scientific paradigm together for this community and for this new dawning era. I think somebody was making a joke earlier about the age of Aquarius. That's exactly what this is all about. And you can be a part of that if you were a viewer. And there's a lot of things that can be done that you don't have to, people who watched the video yesterday and we were talking about creating simulators and, doing Fourier transforms. That all sounds like, when you hear that, you think, oh, I could never do that kind of work. There is plenty of work from myth and research and photography, videography. I think Aaron needs a videographer. We need your help. And the materials and the resources are here on the gateway, so please use them. That's why I produce them. And I'd certainly like to thank everybody for stopping by. Aaron, thank you for making it today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun.
Well, we'll do it again soon, folks. We'll hang out again later in the week. AIM's got a couple of things going on, and I reckon probably we'll get together either Thursday night or Friday morning, something like that. And everybody have a really great day.
Thanks, Raymond.
Or night for Nick.
Yeah, just getting there. We'll be in an hour. Yeah, have a good day. Have a good night, chaps. See you soon.
See you soon.
Yep.
Bye, guys.